of August 2020. I'm the chair of the panel and my name is Annalise Tor. Joining me today by video conference are Deborah Laidlaw and Peter Romy as expert members, and the community representative is Mao Chow. In an effort to minimise the spread of COVID-19 and in the best interest of the health and safety of the community, council staff and panel members, the operation of the Randwick Local Planning Panel has been reviewed and amended to address public health requirements and meet our statutory obligations. Randwick Local Planning Panel will be holding its meetings remotely using conferencing technology until further notice. Members of the public and applicants have been invited to listen to and/or address the panel via teleconference. The panel has individually undertaken inspections of the items from the street and surrounding area or electronically. We have been provided with an assessment report prepared by council staff, who have also briefed the panel on each application via video conference. Today we have a number of people registered to address the panel. The order of speakers for each item will be firstly councillors, objectors, and then those supporting the application, including the applicant or their representative. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. Any extension of time will be at my discretion as chair. The panel has been provided with copies of all submissions received in response to the public exhibition of the application and forwarded a copy of late correspondence. Therefore, there is no need for speakers to repeat all the points made in those submissions or what previous speakers have said. Please focus on the key points that you wish us to understand and consider. The applicant may wish to address issues raised in the council's report, including the response to conditions and the issues raised by an objector. We may ask questions of the speakers to clarify our understanding of what is being said. We expect that each speaker will be heard in silence while they are addressing the panel, and that courtesy and respect will be observed throughout this teleconference. I ask that everyone mutes their microphones unless they are called on to speak, noting that we have the ability to mute all attendees or individuals. After hearing from speakers on all items, the public meeting will be closed and the panel will then deliberate and make our decision. The minutes of the panel's decision, including our reasons, will be available on Council's website as soon as possible after the public meeting. You should be aware that the panel's meetings are recorded and the audio recordings will be uploaded to Council's website. Each member of the panel has been asked prior to the meeting to advise whether they have a conflict of interest to declare in relation to any item on the agenda, and I can confirm that no conflicts of interest have been declared. So now we'll start with the first item, D4020, 34 Clovelly Road, Randwick, and we have Councillor Nielsen wishing to speak. Frank, can you unmute Councillor Nielsen? Or?
No, I can't. Councillor Nielsen, you need to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair and panel members. My concern regarding this development is basically the loss of the garage at the rear of the property. So I suggest there's a condition of consent be added stating the property does not qualify for a residential parking permit, because we know there's a problem of parking in that area, and as they have chosen to eliminate the garage, then I think it's sort of fair for the community that this property does not qualify for a residential parking permit. So if that could be added as a condition of consent, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for any panel members? No. Thank you. And then we have the applicant, on Ms. Juliet Such, on behalf of the applicant, if you're there.
I am here. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mike. Kerry Etkin was trying to join the meeting and hasn't been allowed in. Is it possible to let her in? She's the applicant, was going to be available to answer some questions.
She didn't register to speak, but we can let her in.
She did register.
Sorry, she's with us. She's with us. Yeah,
okay.
I've already let her in. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Okay, so my name's Juliet Such. I'm a town planner and I'm working with the applicant, Kerry Etkin. Kerry is the owner and operator of the approved Pilates and physiotherapy studio on the subject site. She's a single mum, raising a family in the approved, modest and affordable dwelling on the site, which is critical to the successful studio operation. The Alliance Studio employs more than 5 staff and has struggled to continue operating through the pandemic. The studio provides an essential service that connects local people with one another. It also provides a local opportunity for clients, most of whom are from the LGA, to maintain their physical and mental health and vitality. It's also a really important part of the North Randwick neighbourhood centre in which it's located. It brings lots of people to patronise the nearby shops and cafes. Pedestrians access the studio from the Clovelly Road frontage, and the dwelling and the former garage, the subject of this application, are accessed via a right of way from Earl Street. The development application relates to the unauthorised conversion of the garage. The development is permissible by virtue of clause 6.14, and it meets the requirements of that clause. There is sufficient planning merit to justify the conversion of the floor space to habitable floor area. The approved garage does not meet the relevant standard and is unfit for purpose. The existing right-of-way cannot provide safe egress, as cars must reverse across the footpath. The loss of parking is mitigated by excellent access to active public transport options, as well as to car share and light rail. And I note the councillor's recent request that the condition of consent not be included to not allow residential parking permit. The conversion of the garage increases the floor space by 21 square metres, which results in a total FSR of 1.1045 to 1. Consequently, the variation sought is 19.48 square metres or 10.44%. Compliance with the FSR standard is unnecessary, as the existing building demonstrates this is not required to mitigate either adverse built form or amenity impacts, or to conserve the character and significance of the conservation area. Compliance with the FSR standard is unreasonable because the garage is not fit for purpose. It's located below the approved loft of the existing dwelling, and consequently its demolition or removal is not appropriate. To require compliance with the FSR standard would prevent the efficient use of land in this location. The development is not antipathetic to the objectives of the zone or the development standard. It will help achieve residential development that is well integrated with and supports the primary business function of the zone, and that is compatible with the scale and character of the conservation area and not detrimentally impacting on neighbours in terms of visual bulk, loss of privacy, overshadowing or views. There are sufficient environmental planning grounds to justify contravention of the standard. The consistency of the development with the objectives of the zone and the FSR standard make it possible to conclude that the development is in the public interest. There are no issues of regional or state environmental planning significance. Consequently, we consider that the requirements of clause 6.4 and 4.6 have been met. The development is in the public interest. It supports the live-work opportunities and the viability of the neighbourhood centre in this location, and it provides affordable housing and housing diversity with excellent access to public transport. In conclusion, we respectfully request that the panel support the council officer's recommendation for approval of subject to conditions. Thank you. We're happy to answer questions.
Thank you. So in terms of the conditions that are in the council officer's report, you agree with those conditions?
Yes, we're comfortable with those. And I'm not sure, Kerry, whether you heard, but Councillor Nielsen asked that a condition of consent be imposed that require that a residential permit, parking permit, not be applied to the site.
So do you have any comments on that additional condition?
I'm fine with that. That's fine.
All right, thank you. So panel members, do you have any questions of the applicant or the applicant's planner?
I have a question, Chair.
Yes.
I would like to know which entrance would you use? This is a question to the applicant herself. So which entrance do you use when you enter into your home? Is that the shop entrance on Clovelly Road or via the rear lane?
I prefer to enter via the rear lane. just so that I can have a little bit of work-life separation.
Right. And I noticed that you have small children, right? Because when I stood outside of the house, I could hear small children speaking. Now, there is a car parking at the ends of that lane, which obviously needs to come in and out via reverse, a reverse back out. That's the only way for it to come out, really. So is there any concern that you would have using that railing as entrances into your home with your little kids, where there is a car really still using that lane to back in and frontal in and out? Yeah. I mean, frontal in and back out. Yeah.
That car belongs to the gentleman who works and lives at the convenience store 2 doors down. And I know him very well. His name's Jack, and he doesn't go out very much at all. And the times that he does go out, my kids are usually at school. So I'm not worried about using that access for my kids. They play in the rear lane. The neighbours' kids are little as well. They play there as well. So it's not, it's never been an issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Annalise, we can't hear you.
Hey, I was on mute. Sorry. So that item's finished. Thank you. The next item is 148 Brook Street, Coogee, and we have again Councillor Kathy Nielsen.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I'm in total agreement with the recommendations for refusal. I urge the panel to refuse the application. I think that the reasons are very well stated in the report.
All right. Any questions from panel members? No. Thank you. We have an objector, Ms. Felicia Hoopert. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Hi, I think that's done it.
Yes, that's fine. We can hear you now.
Yes,
Thank you.
Please forgive the delay. I'm partially sighted and it's hard to find the right place to click. I'm in complete agreement with Councillor Nielsen and in support of Randwick Council's view. I'm not going to talk about the non-compliance with building standards or the zoning issue, but only about the heritage issue. As a resident of Brook Street, it means the world to me to celebrate Coogee's proud history and proud past. And there are few enough of our magnificent buildings left. And this is a magnificent sandstone-fronted building, and I'm not opposed to progress. I recognise that housing is needed in our area, but this is too high a price to pay, in my view, the demolition of this almost century-old magnificent building. Also, as a grandmother, I feel very strongly that I want my grandchildren and all future generations to be able to benefit from these magnificent historical buildings. As I say, there are so few of them left, and it's too high a price to pay to demolish such a building.
Thank you. Any questions from the panel members? The next speaker is Ms. Linda Avramaides. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Thank you. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here.
You can speak now.
Okay, thank you. Dear Mayor Said and Councillor, This would significantly compromise the cohesive street character, cause density, overshadowing, and further rob the community of its rightful heritage. I ask you in the strongest terms to deny the development application. I make this request in light of concerns that the owner-developer of 148 Brook Street has already engaged in unauthorised actions and may do so again, and that the property has been heritage listed from 10th of July 2020 under the Randwick Local Environment Plan 2012. This illegal act is yet to be addressed. So increasingly, we are living in a world where social and physical isolation are becoming the new norm, a viral wrecking ball causing mounting feelings of anxiety and dislocation. In such an environment, it has become a matter of extreme urgency to hold on to our history, to what provides us with a sense of place and belonging, to hold on to what we know and love. We must treasure what is left of our heritage as it speaks of our roots, our past history, and helps place us as a community and as a culture. The rate of shoddy workmanship has increased dramatically as governments around the country have encouraged more developers to build more high-density housing as a way of containing urban sprawl and generating jobs. According to New Building Commissioner David Chandler, the majority of buildings built in Sydney, about 75% in the last 10 years, are defective and have been rushed through by accommodating certifiers, where cutting corners has become the norm. Randwick has always been renowned for its heritage buildings, which of course are constantly under threat by this rush for high to medium density development. In such a climate, we must especially revere the high standard of building, fine craftsmanship and attention to detail and aesthetics that shine through in our heritage architecture. 148 Brook Street is such an example. If we lose these, we lose our history. You've heard it all before. As for jobs generation, heritage buildings by definition require constant maintenance, restoration, and skilled craftsmen, builders and artisans, as well as state-of-the-art materials. Over the last 2 years, we as a community have fought hard and long to establish the Edgecombe Estate, Heritage Estate. You're aware of this, 148 Brook Street, 41 and 39 Dudley Street are parts of this Edgecombe Heritage Estate. 148 makes a significant aesthetic contribution to the interwar character of the streetscape. The building is considered to have aesthetic significance as it demonstrates an intact example of the Californian bungalow style, providing a distinctive presentation to the street and makes an important contribution to the streetscape, as just said. The demolition of this beautiful building with its elegant portico, graceful proportions, and stunning sandstone exterior would be a travesty on so many levels. The impact on the heritage...
there because you've gone over time. Are you going to be much longer?
Sorry. Not much longer, actually.
Oh, well, how much? Like
about a minute?
No. I mean, essentially, I think what you've put across is your concern about the retention of this heritage item. So I'll just see if there's, unless you've got anything in addition to say, I think you've made that point. So
there's one final point.
Yeah.
A quick one.
Yes.
Thank you. So what we're trying to say is, as a group of local residents, we are not anti-development. We understand that our suburbs are rejuvenated over time and that there is a need for housing development. However, there is a way for development to proceed in tandem and in sympathy with sensible heritage protections. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the panel members? All right, thank you. And we have no representative from the applicant speaking on this matter. So we'll move to the next item, which is D4220, 13 Winchester Road, Clovelly. And we have again Councillor Kathy Nielsen.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I agree with the concerns and objections to the closeness to the boundary on the northern side. And in terms of the objector at number 11, is concerned about the lack of a retaining wall. Whether or not we go into that particular point, I would just like to ensure that in the conditions of consent, it includes a dilapidation report prior to work commencing for 11 Winchester Road.
Thank you. Any questions? No, thank you. And the next speaker is Ms. Tina Vantos. Ms. Vantos, I understand that you wanted to have an extension to be allowed to speak for 7 minutes. I don't think that's necessary, given the number of submissions that you've put in. I think the panel members clearly understand what your concerns are. So if you could limit what you're saying to the 3 minutes, that would be appreciated. Thank you. And the panel members will probably have questions of you. Thank you.
Okay, so so if you understand the premise, basically they're proposing a 2-level building on the northern boundary with our property along the entire length with 0 side setback, where currently no wall exists, and only 90 centimetres away, which is our side setback, from all our windows and doors to our main living areas located in the middle of the south side of our building. The proposed wall is also much higher, 2.7 metres, than the existing hanging fence at 1.7 metres, and taller than our ground floor ceilings, 2.4 metres. Therefore also much higher than all the windows and doors to our main living areas, 1.9 metres. This wall also extends much further to the rear than our building. The significant loss of amenity natural daylight into all our main living areas, whose only source of natural daylight is from our south, is extremely concerning. Council's report is creating confusion. The loss of amenities natural daylight into our main living areas, not direct solar access. We know south-facing dwellings don't get direct sunlight, but they still need natural daylight, and it's not healthy otherwise. The retaining walls has been covered. It's all sand. We're 0.5 metre higher. Current fibro cottages built above ground. There are no retaining walls currently. We're a 2-level brick structure. They'll cause extensive damage to our building. The pitched roof, again, our concerns are in our submissions. The west-facing balcony, halfway along adjoining buildings, highly intrusive. A viewing platform into our main living areas, a significant noise nuisance. Breaching, DCP acoustic privacy objective and control about, both adjoining buildings have bedrooms next to this balcony. It's halfway down the length of both buildings. West-facing highlight windows would avoid these issues. I'll focus on the devastating loss of amenity, the natural daylight into our main living areas right now. I have a PowerPoint presentation that was submitted to council. I can't see that. Is everyone following that?
It hasn't been shared.
I sent it yesterday.
We'll share that now if you like.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So we're already down. So if everyone can go to slide 6. So that's figure 2. Now on the left, you can see our main living area. In the middle, all the windows and doors facing south. To the north is a semi-detached arrangement for us, so no options for windows. East and west are each blocked by 3 and 1 support walls respectively for a suspended concrete slab between our 2 levels, so they're out. And of course, skylight's not possible either. Currently, there's ample space, so all our light comes from the south-facing windows and doors. Currently, there's ample space between the 2 buildings for natural daylight into our main living areas, the 2 side setbacks with the 1.7 metre high fence. The diagram on the right shows what they want. They want to block this vital space between the buildings by building on the northern boundary with a significantly higher wall, much taller than the existing fence, which would have a devastating impact on all natural light into our main living areas. The detached building, so 13 is a detached building and doesn't qualify for a merit assessment at all. They want to override this, but numerical controls are there to protect everyone's homes, not just those who want to develop. And the DCP is clear that if you want to override numerical controls, you need to meet the underlying objectives, Part A, Section 2.3. In this case, the relevant objective is adequate separation between neighbouring buildings for visual and acoustic privacy and to maximise solar access. If everyone can go to slide 10.
All right. You are over time, so I'll grant you another minute.
Thank you. The solar access, you can see that there is a big southern wall. Solar access is...
Sorry, someone's got their speakers on. They'll need to turn them on.
So is that compromising the amount of time I have to speak?
No, just keep going.
Yeah, okay.
So 13 is a detached dwelling, so it doesn't qualify for a merit assessment at all. They want to override this. If they want to override numerical controls, they need to meet the underlying objectives. And in this case,
Sorry, you've gone on to mute somehow. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Okay. So solar access, in this case, the relevant objective that they have to meet is adequate separation between neighbouring buildings for visual and acoustic privacy and to maximise solar access. Solar access is maximised by moving the development to its southern boundary. In this case, there's no loss of solar access for either 13 or 15, or even ambient light from what exists there. A very large tall brick wall, almost 2 levels high, without any windows or doors, that spans the entire length of the southern boundary. Our home would continue to receive natural daylight from our main living areas facing south, not only because of the retention of the northern side setback, but because of the existing 1.7 metre high face being intact. Now, of course, NUT 13 would benefit the most building on its southern boundary because it maximises solar access, and that's for future owners as well. Enhanced visual and acoustic privacy objective is achieved both by us and 13 by moving 13 to its southern boundary, away from all our ground floor main living areas, windows and doors. Number 15 isn't impacted as it has no windows and doors on its ground level facing 13. The second level remains unchanged. Everyone can go to slide 12. So the second, it's a schematic diagram. So the
I'll have to interrupt you there because all this information has been put into your written submissions, which the panel members have read and understood. Sure. And I think we've just got some questions of you, I think.
Okay, sure. Can I just one more thing to say that the DA doesn't meet these objectives, and the DA report doesn't address how these objectives are met to justify the variation. I know the applicant has said that it reduces their internal, but they haven't mentioned at all they have an option to go to the southern boundary. And their argument about these access, the skylights, it's in context. It would be 90 centimetres away from our 2-level brick building, which is so because they've been pushed to the northern boundary, there would be all this overshadowing over these skylights that have been pushed to the northern boundary. But that goes against the increasing solar access objective that the applicant argues. In essence, what the applicant is asking for a merit assessment that only applies to semi-detached dwellings to keep a freestanding appearance of the current detached dwellings from what we can see, because as we said, the underlying objectives to change a numerical control have not been justified in this case. If anyone could just go quickly to the last slide, I want to demonstrate a further point that building on the southern boundary would also be consistent with all properties in the street with the same land size of 250 square metres.
I'm just going to interrupt you there. We've got some questions of the applicant, but my understanding is that there is still a right-of-way. The advice from council officers is that right-of-way has not been extinguished and therefore it would have to be extinguished to build onto the southern boundary. But specifically in terms of addressing your concerns, as I understand it, your property is about 0.5 metre higher than the adjoining property already?
That's correct.
And you said that there's no retaining wall.
Correct.
So how is that level change being retained at the moment?
Sure. Well, what we've noticed is I'm assuming that any foundations that were done for our building, because it was done in 85 is my understanding, would have been done from our side. We've noticed slippage already of the side pathway where the previous owner at 13 dug down a little bit to put in a garden along the fence line. So there's already been slippage there. And that is when they did a bit of investigating and said there were no retaining walls between those two properties, between our property and number 13.
But so there's some sort of edge that's along there, something that's keeping this sort of sound.
Oh, I'm sorry. There are 3 bricks, and when you dig under those bricks, it's just soil. So there's nothing there. It's some sort of like a sort of temporary physical barrier that's not really substantial in terms of holding back soil. And as I said, we've already had a lot of slippage in our back garden as well. The sleepers are now below the lawn level. They've just sunk down into that because there are no proper retaining walls between the two properties.
And the diagram that you showed before, which was a plan of your house, you had it circled around principally the living area and the bedroom.
It's the dining room, it's the living room, and it's a bedroom.
Yeah. So as I understand it, that what's proposed where it adjoins the dining room has the courtyard.
Correct.
So that's set back to 900. So your principal concern would be where the property comes to the boundary adjoining those living room windows and the bedroom window. Is that correct?
Well, our major concern is that this courtyard is redundant in terms of allowing any natural light in, because it would be surrounded. It is surrounded by walls. So it's only an access point for number 13 from their laundry, I believe. It is not in any way an opportunity for any natural light to be able to come into our main living areas. And as I point out, our only access to natural light is from our south-facing windows and doors. Therefore,
yes, but I think, as I understand your main submission is that they're building to the boundary, and
Correct.
that's a variation to the control. So setting it back 900, which is what the courtyard would comply with the control, and the question is whether the rest of the building should be set back 900 or part of the rest of the building should be set back 900.
Correct. Well, preferably set back 900 all the way to the back so that light can filter through from the east. It's basically about maintaining that space between the buildings. And if the applicant built to the southern boundary, the internal dimensions which they want to increase they do achieve that objective. So it's not that they're not achieving the objective they want to achieve by building on the southern boundary as opposed to the northern. And as I've pointed out many times, it increases their solar access. You know, instead of skylights, they can put proper windows down that side and get sunlight filtering into that property, just like it exists now. I have provided in the submissions, you know, the actual photo of what exists now. There's a 1.2 metre side setback with plenty of sunlight that comes into that building as it exists now. And even if you back out a bit,
Good. So I'll just see if the panel members have any questions of you. Are there any questions from the other panel members?
Hello, Chair. I have a question.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Ms. Ventos. I want to know now, looking at one of your slides, you're suggesting that the whole building be moved towards adjoining 15 Winchester Road, right?
Correct.
But my understanding is the front part of the building is supposed to be retained, the original part with the 2 bedrooms. So are you asking that the applicant completely demolish the whole thing and rebuild from scratch?
That would, if they wanted to have, I guess. Well, first of all, I'll start by saying that is one bedroom. It's one bedroom that's adjoining on the boundary at the front. It's adjacent to our carport, so it has no impact on us in terms of that. It has a huge crack in that wall, so I'm not sure about the stability of that wall, that room, or that wall in the first place. What we would be asking is that it be redesigned for a house that it adjoins 15 on the southern boundary, and that would be consistent with all the other properties, as I said, of that size, where you have, even if they're freestanding, we're a freestanding house. So even if they're adjoining one neighbour on one side, and then they have a side setback on the other, that's mirrored on the other side.
Yes, and sorry, that's just a second. Frank, would you mind going down that slide? There is a diagram with the 2 buildings, the suggestion of how it should be built. I think it's further down. Yeah, that one. Yeah, can we have a look? So principally, you're suggesting that the whole building should be shifted towards the boundary of 1315.
Well, not really. Well, not really. The existing room could still stay. It just means that they would basically start at the end of that first room, and it's built adjoining to number 15, that large wall that exists there. It's almost 2 levels high. So their building would start, if they want to maintain that front room, it's only one room.
But then number 13 will have no driveway or what do you call it, side path that goes from the rear to the front. How are they supposed to pull the bins out?
Well, there would be space in that space between the front room, and because their front door would still be at the front. But my understanding is that at the moment, their front door is at the front. It is where it is at the moment. They're maintaining that. So, and the bins at the moment are always stored on the the left in that side passageway near the front. So that doesn't change. That's still there. They store their bins where they store them now. There's no nothing really changes as far as what they're if they built, to the southern boundary.
All right. Okay, thank you. I'll have a study at the plan later again. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions from panel members? All right, so thank you. We'll now hear from the representative of the applicant, Mr. Lee Cosnetta.
Thank you, panel. Can you hear and see me?
Yes, we can now.
Great, thank you. Apologies for the background. I'm actually on a 16-hour round trip to pick up our next family dog, so I've stopped in a park and there's a bit of traffic noise.
Okay. Have you got the dog with you?
No, in 8 hours we will, and then we will return home for 8 hours. But quiet for now, thank you. I'm looking at the PowerPoint presentation, I believe. I can't see people, but I'll continue speaking. I'd like to address, first of all, the conditions of consent discussion. More than happy to accept a dilapidation report condition of consent, subject to gaining proper access to the adjoining property, which in some of the submissions it has been suggested that access won't be provided. We're of course happy to do that dilapidation report for the side pathway. In terms of the conditions, non-standard recommended conditions in the report to do with privacy, we think there are belts and braces approach, a little excessive, but accept all of them as they currently stand. I was also informed yesterday by council officers that there's an additional condition that perhaps didn't make it to the report that they'd like to discuss with you or have included in an amended report. And I'm not sure what the status of that is, but there might be a condition requiring or suggesting a decrease in the wall height of the nil setback wall on the northern boundary by 500 millimetres. If that condition came into effect, what the end result would be that the wall on the northern boundary would be 2.2 metres high as viewed from the neighbouring property. So around 400 to 500 higher than the existing timber paling fence. And internally, that lower space would sit over the kitchen cabinetry and kitchen bench. So that's quite a good outcome internally, and still would allow for 2.7 ceiling heights throughout the ground floor, which the applicant is very happy to accept if that deals with minimising the visual bulk on the adjoining property. More broadly, we say the visual bulk and solar access impacts are entirely appropriate. There was, of course, consideration of where the additions should be located, and utilising the southern boundary with 15 Winchester is not an appropriate outcome that would be actually contrary to the objectives in the controls dealing with solar access. I'd ask that you don't rely on the imagery in those PowerPoint presentations. They're grossly incorrect. They don't display the nil setback that 15 Winchester Street has on their northern boundary, which is excessively high, and not at all like the low wall height that we are proposing at 2.7 or willing to accept at 2.2. We say that by having a northern nil setback for this small portion of the site, it gives us greater amenity, and it's, in fact, it is consistent with the adjoining property immediately to the south. There's been a lot of discussion about privacy concerns, and that's one of the driving forces of having a nil setback on the northern side as well. If we were to have a 900 mil setback, the applicant would want windows in that wall, which will directly overlook the windows that the northern neighbour is concerned about overlooking from. The photos that are in the objector's submission overlook the site so well because there is an unscreened and entirely open second floor balcony on the objector's property that looks directly back into the subject site. It's by putting a northern wall on the boundary that we're looking to protect the privacy of the subject site and remove any interlooking between the two sites. I don't accept the comment that the north-facing skylights won't get sunlight because they're overshadowed by the neighbour. It's contrary to the argument that the south-facing windows on the neighbour receive daylight that's important. And
Mr. Cosnetta, your 3 minutes is up. Are you going to be much longer?
I wasn't, only that I was writing down furiously through the much longer than 3 minutes the objector got to try and directly address their concerns. I don't have a speech. I just wanted to make sure I answered some of those questions and particularly the allegations that weren't true. I think I've covered all. Sorry?
No, sorry, that was just background noise. Yeah.
I believe it was the objector. If I could mute their microphone, I sat quietly through their submission. I believe that deals with all the statements of the objector. I'm happy to answer any more that come up. One matter of administrative purpose, the conditions of consent reference CSA architects in the condition number 1. This is the Smythe and Smythe development. I believe it's just a copy-paste issue from a template report. We just asked that those be corrected to reflect the plans before the panel.
All right, thank you. I think there's some questions from the panel. Ms. Laidlaw, have you got a question?
Yes, I'd just like to ask, the site slopes down away from the street towards the rear boundary. And there at the back there's a deck with 3 steps. Have you considered or turned your mind to introducing that split level inside the dwelling? So reducing the height, lowering the height of the ground floor, which would also assist in reducing the height of any structure adjacent to the northern boundary.
Thank you. Yes, we have. So at the moment, the existing dwelling has steps at the end of the front 2 bedrooms. And that is what drives the current 500mm difference between the ground floor of the subject site and the neighbouring site. And that drives the 500mm difference in the courtyard heights and this retaining wall issue as well. It's purposefully proposed to have no steps inside the house for easier access and the ongoing livability of the property for the people that are in there, for the occupants. What that also does is it allows for the floor level of the proposed dwelling to be roughly the same, 50 mils out, roughly the same as the pathway it's adjacent to and the floor level of the neighbouring property. That means that when the slab is poured for the subject site, it in itself will butt joint the pathway of the adjoining property to deal with these dilapidation of the pathway issues. So it was purposefully brought up. The building is significantly under the height control, wall height control. And so we felt that there was room within those building envelope controls to have those steps in the rear yard. In terms of reducing the height of the northern boundary, we can do that with compressed ceiling heights inside anyway, along the kitchen bench and the lowered 2.2 northern wall, and we're happy to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that
lowering it in further. I'm sorry?
I mean, that would still mean at 2.2, it'd still be 400 above a normal fence height. And I think the existing fence is 1.6, so it would actually be 600 millimetres higher than the existing fence. And it is on within the required setback to that boundary.
A few things I'd say to that. The fence is currently entirely located on the applicant's site, and there's a desire to replace that with a compliant height 1.8 metre high fence in any event. If the wall was lowered much further, then it would require steps to be brought back into the design of the dwelling. And the occupants of this dwelling, they would like to stay in this dwelling. They would like to have a level dwelling without steps in the middle of it, which I think is perfectly reasonable and doesn't create any impact other than the side fence height, as appreciated from the neighbouring property, will be 400 higher than the current fence. It's a far better outcome for environmental sustainability for the ongoing use of the house to have it flat. It's a better outcome to have it higher out of the ground if it can be, to get as much solar access as it can. So we don't think that there's any planning merit in doing that. In terms of it being a required setback, there's DCP provisions specifically that talk about discretion being able to be offered on small sites and on sites like these. We don't say this is a semi, we never have, but there's discretionary powers in the DCP itself to talk about nil setback areas, and they're often accepted, just as they have on subject sites' immediate southern neighbour. Southern neighbour has a nil setback on its northern wall for the entire length of the property that's some 4.5 metres tall. It's nothing like that wall. It's much lower. It maintains solar access and ventilation. We think it's the right, we think that's the right approach to the site. So we don't think that step down internally would be necessary.
Okay, can I ask you one question? I mean, given that bulk on the issue of bulk, you've got 2.7 metre high ceilings at first floor as well. What's the need for that?
It's compliant with the DCP that requests 2.7. I'm sorry.
For bedrooms?
Yeah, we think that's great amenity. It allows for ceiling fans without feeling compressed in that space. The building's significantly below the wall height control, and even more significantly below the overall height control. So compressed ceilings wouldn't actually have any greater amenity benefit to any adjoining property. The solar access diagrams demonstrate that shadow falls on a blank wall, the large 4.5 metre high blank wall of the neighbouring property. So there's no material benefit to be gained by lowering either the wall height or the overall height. The only consequence would be a lowering of the amenity into the subject site.
So, any other questions from panel members? Mr.
I have a couple more, but if somebody wants to ask them, then that's
Mr. Romy, and then we'll come back to you.
Okay. It's Peter Romy here. It's Gary, is it?
Lee. Sorry, Peter. Hi.
Oh, Lee, is it?
Yes.
We were given. Oh, okay, righto. Lee, you're the planner, Lee? Is that right? No.
I am. Yes, I was engaged
okay.
after the lodgement, and I'm the applicant's planner.
All right, because the questions I'm going to ask you are sort of more on the architectural side, but hopefully you can answer them.
To jump in, we were requested to bring the architect along as well, and I understand that David from Smythe & Smythe is online somewhere, but we'll both try and answer the questions if we can.
All right. Okay, well, look, the first question I had was just, Deborah's already asked it about, other than, I didn't quite get your rationale for not considering an internal change of level within the house other than a desire to have a level floor all the way through. You mentioned something about having the slab level commensurate with the adjacent. So you're actually raising the ground level on your side of the property so that the slab level would be approximately the same as the adjacent exterior paving. But I didn't quite get the rationale for that.
Sure. Well, there's two, I guess the rationale, the motivator is to have a level floor plan throughout the building. The occupants then can age in place. It's a far more equitable access arrangement for anyone that's going to be in their house. And I think everyone, if they have the opportunity, would prefer to have a flat level ground floor plane if they can, if it doesn't push building heights over the height control, it doesn't breach floor space controls, it doesn't do other things. I don't think the height of the ground floor, for example, would be even considered if we weren't looking at the 900 mil setback variation on that northern side. It's not unusual for it to be out of the ground at the back. And we're so far below all of the height limits. We're able to bring down the northern setback wall to 2.2 metres as appreciated from the adjoining property. We think they're all very good compromises. The point I was making about the pavement levels being the same is knowing that the pavement level of the adjoining property is not 500 mil above the subject site. What raising the levels does is it addresses that inconsistency and allows for the butt joining of the slab to essentially hold up the pathway of the adjoining property. It deals with the retaining wall issue, and it provides two sites that from the front of the street are level, and at the back of the property will be level.
I don't see what the problem. When you say dealing with the retaining wall issue, what's the issue?
Well, I don't raise it as an issue, but it's persistently raised by the neighbour, and I'm looking to address it. I don't think there is an issue. Of course, it can be built. Of course, it can be structurally sound.
Yeah.
The motivator is the level access inside the house, and where it has no material benefit to any adjoining property to lower it other than to diminish the amenity of the subject site, I don't think it's a reasonable request. I don't think it's grounded in any of the planning controls. So we don't think it's necessary.
Okay. Just one final question. The reference to the possibility of a 900 setback on the northern boundary. At the moment, you have a smallish courtyard between the bathroom and laundry and number 11.
Yes.
There's no dimension on that. That's more than 1100 visually. Do you happen to know how wide that space is?
Yeah, I've seen it in one of the reports. Let me just find it. I think it's even.
Oh, look, it's in the report. Find it. That's fine.
It's 1 point something. It's more than 900.
Yeah, it is. It looks like about 1200, something like that.
Yeah, I actually think it's an obscure number, like 1.326 or 1.248.
Right.
It's in the report.
Just one final question. If the condition to lower the northern wall on the boundary by 500 became part of an approval, I think I understand you're saying that you can still make that internal arrangement within the kitchen work.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's quite a good outcome over a kitchen bench, and I see it quite often.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I believe it's 1.95. The setback. It's referenced on page 96 of the council report.
Okay, so that's a substantial piece of open space there on that boundary. In that section.
I think it'll be useful for ventilation and solar access for the subject site. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Lee.
Thank you.
Ms. Laidlaw, you had some further questions?
Yeah, I think it's just on that courtyard. How will that courtyard be drained?
Good technical question. I believe there's a stormwater management plan, or if at the very least a stormwater management plan requirement as part of construction. I don't have the answer in front of me, but I know that it can be done. Presumably, I don't know. I would be assuming. Happy to take any condition required.
Well, it could be just soft landscaping.
Yeah, Lee.
Yes, is that David?
Yeah, David Smythe here. Yes, it's soft landscaping. Peter beat me to the punch. It's soft landscaping.
Thank you, both of you.
Thank you.
And just one other thing, I think there was a condition on requiring the northern wall to be rendered. I know you say that you can construct that wall entirely within the site. Have you got any ideas how you're actually going to do that?
Well, this was put to us many months ago by the council that it should be light in colour, rendered or finished to the neighbours' specifications. We're more than happy to fix it to the neighbours' specifications. However, they have indicated that they don't want access to their property, which obviously makes it difficult. The applicant, his profession is in heritage restoration buildings, and he works a lot with skilled skilled brickworkers, and he's spoken to specialist brickworkers that can essentially finish the wall from inside the subject property without needing to go next door, but that requires it to be a face brick wall. They could be light coloured bricks, but frankly, if there's no access to that northern wall from the adjoining property, we can't render it or paint it. We could overhand paint it from the subject site, but I don't think we could render it. But more than happy to finish it in whatever palette materiality that the neighbour would like to see from her side, because we won't be seeing it.
Any further questions?
Well, if I just sort of, because I think Peter's also mentioned it, and I just want to explore that issue about if you had the choice of us saying, well, you know, that there is a requirement for a 900 millimetre setback, you either comply with that or you drop the floor. What's the response to that?
Well, firstly, I don't think it's a reasonable set of options. If we wanted a 900 millimetre setback on this northern side, we would have pursued a complying development certificate a year ago when this DA was first conceived, which can be significantly larger in all respects and have open windows without the type of privacy treatments that we've proposed, with far greater impact. This is the bit we're asking for that we can't get through a CDC. We think it's entirely reasonable to have a nil setback. And if we had to choose one of those, then we would want to have the lower wall, because if we had the 900 mil setback, I don't believe it would proceed in the form that it's currently submitted.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I've just got a couple more questions. So if we look at Plan DO05, and this may be some questions for the architect. I'm just trying to clarify. So on that plan, it's got the dimension 900 at the rear of the new deck, the living area. I'm not exactly sure where that 900 finishes, but it's implying that the kitchen cupboards, etc., are in the order of about 800. Is that correct, or am I reading it?
No. So it's 900 to the deck, but in a scale sense, that wall is a masonry wall, so that would be 270 or 300, yeah. And then that's 600 for the kitchen bench.
And the new courtyard, we were told, was
it's
1.3.
We just went and checked. It's 1.3.
1.3.
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of the actual need for this extra 900 millimetres rather than being set back, did you explore options such as having the courtyard going longer, so that, like, the dining room being, the courtyard being extended into the dining room, or relocating the kitchen so that it's potentially, because when you look at the plan of the adjoining neighbour, the critical rooms, it would appear to me, are that living room in particular. I think you've addressed the dining area because you've got the courtyard adjoining the dining area, but the living area, you've got the wall hard up against the fence. So the option of making the courtyard longer, is that something that you've looked at all?
No, we haven't. We haven't looked at that. No.
Can you comment on what the implications of that would be?
Well, it would make the amenity of the properties less. You know, smaller floor space. It also has, you know, quite a big effect on a very small site.
Okay.
Could I just add? Yeah. One of the immediate outcomes would be there'd be a north-facing window provided on that setback area to try to regain some solar access into the dwelling that would be immediately opposite the living room window of the objector's property. I think it's a worse privacy outcome.
You're saying that the new dining room would end up having a north-facing window? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And it wouldn't require consent if it had to either. It would be a CDC window. There'd be full-height windows to match the full-height windows of the neighbouring property, and they would look directly at each other with no requirement for offsetting them. What we're trying to do is introduce privacy through this northern wall. And that would be counter to the objectives, in my opinion.
And previously you mentioned about wanting to have everything on the same level. But as I understand it, at the moment you step down into the garden, so there is actually sort of like a, I don't know, half a metre change in level between the floor level of the house and then the floor level of the garden. So that's where you've got your change of level.
Correct.
And you prefer to have that change level externally as opposed to between the retained existing building and the new extension.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions from anyone? No. All right. So that's that matter. We'll move on to the next matter, which is D 4.43, 38 Jennings Street. We don't have any speakers for that matter. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. And then the next one is D44 20. That's 7 Seaside Parade, South Coogee. We have Mr. Lance Zarb. Mr. Zarb, are you there? We'll move on to Mr. Colin Love. Is Mr. Love there?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you, Chair and panel. Are you ready for me to commence?
Yes, yes. Yeah. Start now.
All right. Thank you. This development's had a checkered history. There's been no less than 17 amendments to the originally approved DA, which has confused and obfuscated the situation and makes it difficult for me and other neighbours and the council to understand what's been approved and what hasn't. But here you are being asked to approve a fishing deck, which maybe on the face of it seems to be no big deal if that's the purpose for which it is intended. But you do have to look at the surrounding circumstances. And I don't want to go over what I've already said in my submission, but I invite you to look at the application made by the applicant some time ago about raising the lawn level around the pool due to her disabilities and to avoid steps, the removal of some steps because she uses a wheelchair. Now she's applying for a fishing deck for fishing, which she can only get access to by steps. In relation to the purpose of the application, the room shown as a plant room above the proposed deck on the northern boundary adjoining my property, the applicant had 2 double glass sliding doors on the ocean side, the eastern side of this room, and from which one can only infer it was meant to be habitable and not to be used as a plant room. 5 months ago, the certifier issued a written directions notice, which is referred to on page 150 of the report from council, regarding non-compliance issues and giving the applicant 14 days to rectify the works, including removing the unapproved glass walls in the plant room and to revert to the masonry wall, the wall back to masonry to comply with the approved plans. That written direction notice has still not been complied with 5 months later. Also included that the applicant was to remove a concrete slab immediately in front of those glass doors, which could be used as a balcony. And I noticed that the council officer in the report says that the room's not habitable. It's my respectful submission that the panel should satisfy itself that the masonry walls are reinstated in the plant room in lieu of glass to ensure that the fishing deck is not just deployed to create a balcony in front of what will be used as a habitable area. And I might mention the applicant previously had an application approved by council to construct awnings on another level. Immediately they got the approval to construct the awnings, they proceeded to construct balconies until a stop work order was made following complaint from another neighbour. And then they had to put in an application to have balconies approved, which it was always their intention. So I'm suggesting the panel should impose a further condition if it's minded to grant, to approve this application, that any approval is conditional on the applicant complying with the written directions notice relating to the plant room and concrete platform already unlawfully constructed outside that plant room. Thank you, Chair, panel.
Thank you. Any questions from the panel members?
Might I just also add, I'm sorry, Chair, that
yes,
the wall, that room, that plant room, has been boarded up so nobody can see into it, and they're obviously hiding something. You know, it's not. They're not being transparent.
Thank you. Do we have Mr. Zarb here? No? All right, so we'll move on to the applicant, Mr. Gary Chapman, the representative of the applicant.
Thank you, panel chair and panel members. I'm here to just address you on the application in front of you, which is the deck, not on other matters regarding certification, etc. I've read the Council Office report. We support the recommendation for approval. I note that condition 2A requires a reduction in the width of the deck. The proposal as it currently stands aligns with the decking at number 5 Seaside. However, to move this application along, we have no objection to accept the condition of consent. That's all I have to say. And, if you have questions, hopefully I can answer them.
Yes, Ms. Laidlaw, you've got a question? You're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I just took off.
Thank you.
On the plans, I think it refers to the deck. It is a concrete slab deck.
Yeah, it will be.
And the slab that appears to be there at the moment, is that the slab you're going to use?
I don't know if there is a slab there at the moment.
The slab that the issue about whether it was going to be supporting scaffolding or something.
Oh, sorry, I'm not aware of that slab. The architect is listening to this. I don't know if he can come on and answer that question. I'm not aware of that.
If the architect's there and can answer the question. What's the architect's name? Sorry.
Paul DeSantos.
Is Mr. DeSantos there, please?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. My understanding from the builders on site is that slab was a temporary slab used for the construction of the scaffolding during construction. That is not the slab to be used for the fishing deck.
Yeah, but it's the same level as the proposed fishing deck.
It's our understanding it's a similar level.
And the same dimensions?
To what's been recommended by council would be just about the same dimensions, yes.
Mm.
The application was a much larger deck, and councils, which we accept, wanted to reduce the size of the deck.
Mm. And the current concrete platform, how is that supported?
I wasn't involved in the construction of it, so I couldn't tell you.
All right, but it's quite a wide, what is it, 2.6, well, if it be reduced, you're confident that can be supported, that can be cantilevered out from the existing dwelling structure without any support?
Well, there's already one there, which, as I said, has been used in construction to support scaffolding, so I can take it that the new one could be built in a similar manner.
But you don't know whether it's got supports or not?
As I said, no, I wasn't privy to the construction of it.
And do you know what the profile is underneath? Is it rock or is it soil or what is it?
No, I understand it's going to have cantilevered supporting members from the existing structure. There's rock it's not relying on them.
The existing structure, the existing plant room has already been built, and this slab would be coming out from that plant room, wouldn't it?
Correct.
So if it's going to be a brand new concrete slab, it can't be formed as part of the slab of the plant room.
I didn't say it would be. They can install steel cantilevered back into the existing structure to form that the new fishing deck.
So anyway, if it were to be approved, you wouldn't have a problem with a condition being put on that the deck, whatever length it may be, is to be of a cantilevered structure with no support piers or other form of structure forward of the plant room to support it.
Sure. Okay. That will go intent in the application.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Romy.
Just a follow-up question about that. I mean, the section AA clearly shows a supporting strut for the new slab. Admittedly, that section shows the width of the deck, fishing deck, as proposed, rather than as we're thinking of the possibility of reducing it. So I guess I'm not entirely convinced by the response that it can be, even a reduced width can be supported without any structure down onto the rock platform. So I'd like a response to that, please.
We can get a structural engineer to confirm that it will not be no structures upon the existing rock face to support that proposed plan. As I said, there's one already in place which demonstrates that it can be done.
Yeah, I think the point is, though, if you don't know what's holding that slab up, you don't know whether it can be done.
Well, there's one there which demonstrates that it can be done.
Yeah, it can be done, but it might have piers underneath supporting it.
One way of doing it is a structural engineering report. Yeah. Prior to use of the deck, that it has a structural engineering report saying it's suitable for use.
I must admit, given it's a concrete slab and then you've got a glass balustrade on top of it, and it's supposedly not connected to the existing plant or not forming part of the formwork of the plant room. I'm not a structural engineer, but I don't find it convincing that that's not going to be able to be constructed with no support at all. So if a condition goes on that it be cantilevered, that will be how it will have to be constructed.
Yes, and we have to accept that.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Okay, that concludes that matter. And the next matter, the last one on the agenda, is D45 200 to 10 Arden Street, but we have no registered speakers for that matter.
That's correct.
Right, so the public meeting is now concluded, and as I said before, the panel will now move into closed session for deliberation and to determine the items on the agenda. The panel's decisions and the reasons for our decision will be placed on the council's internet hopefully tomorrow. And so the meeting is now concluded at 2:18. Thank you.
Sorry, could I ask a procedural question?
Yes.
Before I start, my understanding was that the PowerPoint presentation would be shared with the panel members, and I was a bit surprised that it hadn't been put up for my my presentation, given that the panel members couldn't do a site inspection and we were relying on the photos and the in that presentation.
The PowerPoint has been sent to the panel members, and it was being shared on the screen, but when you first started, it wasn't up on the screen. So then it was put up on the screen sort of a few minutes into your presentation. But the actual PowerPoint has been sent to the panel members as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.